Happy Father's Day.
Tonight, happy birthday from Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump gathers his hangers-on for a 78th birthday and grievance fest. Does his rambling speeches these days run the risk of sounding a lot like President Biden? Supreme politicians, as controversies swirl around the highest court in the land, should we start treating justices as politicians? And hard knocks.
You just have to be what most people aren't. Consistent, determined, and willing to work for it.
Tom Brady delivers some life advice. Why nobody can say those things about the rest of life. Live pictures from West Palm Beach, Florida. We start with breaking news at 7 p.m. Eastern. The former president is expected to speak any moment to a group of supporters for his 78th birthday. He is speaking. We'll dip in here and there as news warrants. While President Biden is on his way back from Italy after the G7 summit. This was video of him hopping off Marine One, Air Force One to D.C., and then on to Los Angeles for a star-studded fundraiser, George Clooney and the like. Both men now turn their attention to debate prep. Although it seems Biden has little time, Mr. Trump has little interest in getting ready to rumble in front of the American people. So for this Friday, welcome to the fairest show on television. First tonight, getting a win. That's what it's all about. Both Biden and Trump have less than 2 weeks to strategize and to figure out how to get a win at the debate on June 27th. Conventional wisdom tells us the debates never mattered much. But this debate schedule is unconventional, much earlier than in past years. And that leaves the door open for both candidates to change the conversation completely before the conventions this summer. And there's a new wrinkle. Mr. Trump appears ever prone to his own ramblings. CNBC reports he had another episode yesterday when meeting with CEOs in Washington.
I spoke to a number of CEOs who I would say walked into the meeting being Trump supporter-ish or thinking that they might be leaning that direction, who said that he was remarkably meandering, could not keep a straight thought, was all over the map.
He was talking about sharks in Nevada at his rally. We'll listen in and see if he gets off script or the teleprompter during his remarks today. Donald Trump, for his part, keeps lowering expectations, not for himself. He keeps lowering expectations for Joe Biden. It makes no sense, but he keeps doing it. Low expectations helped Biden during the State of the Union, and Trump keeps at it.
Well, maybe I'm better off losing the debate. I'll make sure he says I'll lose the debate on purpose. Maybe I'll do something like that. But he really, it's very interesting. I've been asked this question. If he does badly, will they take him off the ticket?
It's a fair question. Chris Hahn is here, former senior aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast, NewsNation political contributor. I have a plan, Hahn, since it's Friday, all right? You ready?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to ask you questions, and then you are going to answer them without talking points. Ready?
No, I don't have any talking points. It's Friday. I didn't even put on a tie.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for preparing so well for this television broadcast.
I don't even know what the topics are, so go ahead.
Is it really inconceivable? That if Joe Biden does terrible on June 27th, that Democrats don't start talking about switching horses?
Of course it's not inconceivable. If he falls on his face at the debate, you're going to hear a lot of that. Democrats are wetting their pants right now over nonsense with Joe Biden. So if things go horribly wrong,
they're wetting their pants over nonsense?
There will be a conversation. I think they're wetting their pants over nonsense. Little things like he's looking the wrong way in a photo op, which was clearly not the case when you look at the full picture of what's going on there. I heard so much about that over the last couple of days, not from conservatives, from liberals. And I'm saying to them, relax. Everything's going to be okay.
Okay, so somebody else who thought he could relax was Ronald Reagan in 1984, right? He was up by 18 points over Walter Mondale. The economy was doing great. But presidents are in a bubble, and I think we can fairly say that Joe Biden is in a bubble a lot more than any other president has been in recent memory in terms of media access, in terms of public events, on and on and on. And this is what Reagan did at the '84 debate. Take a listen.
4 years ago, in similar circumstances to this, I asked you, the American people, a question. I asked, are you better off than you were 4 years before? The answer to that obviously was no, and as the result, I was elected to this office and promised a new beginning. Now, maybe I'm expected to ask that same question again. I'm not going to, because I think that all of you, or not everyone, those people that are in those pockets of poverty and haven't caught up, they couldn't answer the way I would want them to. But I think that the most of the people in this country would say, yes, they are better off than they were 4 years ago.
That debate performance cost him 7 points. Are Democrats respectful? And are they talking to the White House and telling the White House that lives in its own bubble to be respectful of how high the stakes are?
Yeah, I think the White House knows how high the stakes are, which is why they asked for an early debate. I think right now the questions of the president's age, which is legitimate. Look, he's 81 years old. Donald Trump's turning 78 tonight. They're both old men. Let's be clear. But Biden is in the bubble. You correctly point that out. His every word is parsed. So he has to come to this debate with the same energy he came to the State of the Union. And he's got to deliver the message clearly and concisely without rambling on like Reagan did in that clip. But if you remember, the second debate in 1984 was one of the great debate moments in the history of presidential debates, which I think sealed the victory for him.
Right. That's when Reagan said, I'm not going to make youth and inexperience an issue. Just a minor problem. I think we can all agree that Joe Biden is not Ronald Reagan in his ability to communicate, especially contemporaneously.
Nobody is.
Nobody, and that's fair. So let's talk about how Joe Biden gets a win.
Maybe
right?
Bill Clinton.
How does he slam the door on Donald Trump, which I know Democrats are plotting right now? I had a theory. What if Joe Biden said, look, you were a convicted felon. He actually says it out loud to Donald Trump. You're a convicted felon. You were convicted by a jury of your peers, but I am going to push Kathy Hochul to pardon you because I don't think this is good for the country. I'm going to pardon you on the federal charges. Let's have the voters decide. That changes everything, right?
Yeah.
You think he'd lose votes, or would he lose votes?
I don't think he'd lose votes, but here's what I would condition that with. Accept the results of the 2020 election and admit your role in agitating people who showed up at the Capitol. Not full responsibility, but your role in it. And if Donald Trump is willing to do that, I would put that to Donald Trump right on that debate stage. Admit that I won the election and admit that your words got people revved up that ultimately led to them storming the Capitol. And I will grant the full and clear pardon right now, Mr. Trump.
Yeah, but
I don't think Donald Trump is capable of that kind of contrition.
That's not what Ford did, right? That's not how Ford healed the country. And I'm just thinking here that if Joe Biden wants a clear and unquestioned win, he has to do something bold, right?
When Ford granted Nixon the pardon, Nixon accepted his guilt because the Supreme Court had ruled that accepting a pardon is accepting of guilt. Admitting guilt, I should say. And there was a young U.S. attorney who had to deliver that message and get that admission from Nixon. We will never get that from Donald Trump. He's incapable of ever accepting responsibility for anything.
Okay, so you think about how high the stakes are, right? Roanoke College, mid-May, Biden and Trump are tied at 42 each in Virginia. Okay, Virginia is a Democrat plus 10, plus 12 state. Biden won by more than 10. Clinton won by 5. Obama won by 3. It is moving blue, and now Glenn Youngkin wins it after Biden does, and now Trump is tied. If Donald Trump is actually tempered, right, and disciplined in this debate, and he doesn't shout and say silly things, the fact that Virginia is in play should terrify you guys, shouldn't it?
Well, I don't think Virginia's in play, even looking at those numbers. But yes, it would. And if Donald Trump shows up and acts like a grown-up, acts like somebody we would trust with the nuclear codes, then it's a problem for the Democrats, especially if Joe Biden has some, speech malfunction at the debate. But, those are a lot of ifs. And I think that you hit the nail on the head in your opening statement. Donald Trump and his supporters have consistently lowered the bar for Joe Biden. The cover of the New York Post yesterday lowered the bar for Joe Biden in this debate. And more people are going to watch the debate than anything else that's going to happen between now and the next debate. So whatever happens at the debate is going to be very telling going forward. And Donald Trump has been very meandering in his own ways in his speeches.
Yeah. No,
and
we said that off the top. Sorry, let's see if we can get some agreement going into Friday. Okay, we're going to agree that you're a better golfer, number one. And number two, we are going to agree.
No, we are not.
And we are going to agree, guys. People will understand why I'm making that statement. And number two, we're going to agree that the least important part of the debate is going to be the policy.
Well, it depends on the policy, but yes, I think the performances are going to be a very big part, especially for Joe Biden. Donald Trump, you know,
all right,
has
hold on
chops.
1 second. We're going to dip into Trump real quick. Listen up.
Okay.
It's a lot. They should be ashamed of themselves. They're hurting our country badly. They're hurting our country badly. Biden gets up, makes the worst State of the Union speech anyone's ever seen, and every one of them said, wasn't he wonderful tonight? Wasn't he wonderful? So in addition to all of his other well-documented offenses, crooked Joe Biden is now also guilty of providing material support for terrorism. Under Biden, there's been a 3,000% increase in the number of people on the terror watch list crossing into our country from the southern border. 3,000%. And that comes from the Border Patrol. Our country is going to pay a steep price for many, many years. This is a terrible thing that's happened.
All right, so that is Donald Trump on the teleprompter and pretty much on message. Han, if that Donald Trump shows up at the debate, I think that's the worry for you guys, right?
Look, he's going to show up at the debate and say Joe Biden can give a good State of the Union. Well, go ahead, show up. You're going to lie about border crossings. Go ahead, show up. Say that. I don't think that that's possible. He won't have a teleprompter. He'll be, free-range Trump, which is never good for Trump. And honestly, the best thing that happened to Joe Biden is that trial in New York ending and Donald Trump getting back on the stump because people don't like what they're seeing.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. When Donald Trump is off the trail and sort of playing the victim or held in the victimhood, or occupied, good word, it works out well for him. And when he's out, makes a lot of news. We'll leave it at that. All right, Han, this works out well. Don't prepare anymore and no more ties, all right?
There you go.
All right, there we go.
Have a great weekend.
You too. Happy Father's Day. Trump appointed justices just overturned a Trump-made rule. Get that. And Democrats complain. Why the Supreme Court may never be able to regain its legitimacy, and Tom Brady says success can only be achieved by hard work. What he couldn't say next.
But understand this, life is hard. No matter who you are, there are bumps and hits and bruises along the way.
If you haven't heard about Tom Brady's speech yet, well, listen up. Because no matter where you go this weekend, whatever you do for Father's Day weekend, there's going to be people talking about it.
To be successful at anything, the truth is you don't have to be special. You just have to be what most people aren't. Consistent, determined, and willing to work for it. No shortcuts.
It lays bare one of the biggest issues of this generation. Meritocracy versus participation trophies. Former roommate of Tom Brady, former defensive lineman for the New England Patriots, Dave Nugent, is with us. Dave, we appreciate it. I'm guessing hearing those words from Tom Brady did not surprise you.
Not at all. Tom is just one of the most strongest mentally strongest persons that I've ever met. He was like that from our rookie year when he was our fourth string quarterback. And, he didn't even travel with the team. And I would come home late at night from road games and he'd be sitting in our den with the playbook out, studying the plays, always preparing like he was the starter. And he just had that attitude that I'm going to focus on what I can control. And when my moment comes, I'll be ready for it. And as it turned out, his moment came and he was ready for it. And the franchise history changed forever.
Yeah, and I think he's a role model for a lot of reasons, not just because he won, but because of how he's conducted his life. I think you'd agree with me on that, and how he speaks and what he's willing to say. I'm interested because we put up the what we call the panel next to you with your bio, and one of the things it says is that you're a volunteer coach for your son's football team. And the lessons that Brady's talking about that work in on the football field, the baseball field, the soccer field, I think the field of life, are now only really taught in sports. They're not taught in school. They're not taught about medical school and lots of other things to kids. And I'm wondering if you think that that's going to change the generation going forward.
I hope so. And I think that's why it's so important to celebrate someone like Tom Brady that has those values, to keep those values alive, because it's so important in sports. Not everybody's going to win. Not everybody's going to be successful, but it's about the process. It's about giving everything you have. And sometimes the harder you work, the luckier you may become.
Yeah, there's a flip side to that, right? Is you can work really hard, and Roger Federer talked about this in his commencement address. You can work really hard and still not make it, or still get knocked down. Here's Brady on bumps and bruises.
But understand this, life is hard. No matter who you are, there are bumps and hits and bruises along the way.
All right, so you compare that, right, to Yale. Nearly everyone gets A's at Yale. Does that cheapen the grade? What's the danger in telling kids and teaching kids that life doesn't have to be hard?
I think this everybody gets a trophy culture is damaging sports, and, I would even say NIL is damaging sports, because you're taking away the incentive to work hard. Not everybody's going to win. And if you know that, then you're going to work that much harder to compete. And if you know that it's going to be hard going in, that you're just going to let it roll off your shoulders and you're going to compete even harder the next day. And that's something that Tom Brady was a master of for 20 plus years and inspired so many people along the way.
Right. I get that it's a danger to sports and it cheapens sports, but sports is a meritocracy. And, the NFL, the best people play. In life, we're now seeing sort of the participation trophy and the culture of life, and people aren't being told you have to work hard. I was fascinated by the fact that the NFL retweeted Brady's speech and said, you got to watch this on their Twitter, which is interesting because the NFL has embraced DEI. They're all about social justice, and equity is exactly the opposite of the lessons that Brady's teaching about hard work and meritocracy.
Yeah, I think schools, I think the workplace, they could all take a lesson, again, from generational talent like Tom Brady that still believes in hard work. Nothing's given to you, and I think we could all learn from that.
Well, Dave, forgive me for saying this, but I think there's a lot we could all learn from you. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, and also from your humility about all this and being willing to talk about your good friend. Thanks for being here. Happy Father's Day.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
A lot of what Tom Brady talked about are lessons collectively that we've learned from our fathers. Kind of hear your dad saying that same thing about hard work. Certainly, Brady echoes what my dad taught me. I'm lucky enough to still have him around. It's Father's Day weekend, and I thought it fitting to share some thoughts about Dad publicly while he could still appreciate it. That's us this past weekend. Great weekend. Great time together. I wrote about it in War Notes. That's our free online newsletter. It comes out every day at 4 p.m. Eastern. You can go to warnotes.com and subscribe. You can also see my Father's Day note and respond with your thoughts. I'll see you on social media at Leland Vittert. Here's an idea for you. Just a thought on this Friday afternoon. Maybe it's time to treat the Supreme Court justices like the politicians they are, because they are politicians. How it would work when we come back. Trump-appointed Supreme Court justices went from heroes to zeros today. They ruled a Trump-era rule banning bump stocks on guns. That's something that turns a gun effectively into a machine gun or makes it fire like a machine gun. Goes beyond the federal government's legal abilities to ban things. To be fair, this isn't about guns. It's about Congress and the president doing their jobs, actually passing laws rather than trying to use executive power. After the 2017 Vegas concert shooting, America's deadliest shooting in history, dozens of people died. President Trump wanted a cheap win, and rather than pushing Republicans in Congress to pass a law banning bump stocks, which he could have done, he had the ATF use its considerable powers to rule them illegal. That's not how it's supposed to work. Big changes like that should require laws. That's how the framers drew it up. And today, in an especially fun twist of irony, liberals were upset Trump-appointed justices vacated a Trump-made rule.
This Supreme Court, with Donald Trump's 3 nominees, have down the line done what the gun crowd wants. And I think, just like abortion, I think this gun issue is a cleaving issue in this election that people just don't feel safe. They don't feel safe sending their kids to school. And one party is standing up for doing something about that. And one, Trump said that at the NRA convention, we want you to have as many guns as you think you want.
John Yoo is here, professor of law at the University of California, Berkeley, former deputy assistant attorney general, author of The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Supreme Court, making you the perfect guest for this segment. Professor, it's good to see you, sir. Thank you. Is it time to give up the ghost of this idea of a non-political Supreme Court and treat them like the other 2 branches of government that are completely partisan?
I'm afraid there are activists who would like to do that. There are people attacking the justices, their finances, their friends, what flags they fly, who they talk to at cocktail parties now. But look, there's a difference between ideological differences, which have always been on the Supreme Court from the very beginning, whether someone is for a big federal government or a small federal government, whether they're for privacy and abortion rights or for a limited state-led approach to individual rights. But that's different than whether they're Republicans and Democrats. Now, the thing is, part of this is the Supreme Court's fault in a sense, because they have become so powerful that people who care about issues like abortion are now taking all the tools they use for presidential campaigns and congressional campaigns, and they're starting to inflict it on the court. And that's what we're seeing now, people trying to turn the Supreme Court into just another political actor and use all the weapons and the arrows and the slings and the stones that they would use on a presidential candidate. Now they're using them on Supreme Court justices, too.
All right, so just before the gun case came out, this is the Supreme Court saying that bump stocks are okay and banning them by decree is not allowed. There needs to be a law. Sunny Hostin of ABC, The View, said that suddenly her faith in the Supreme Court had been restored. Take a listen.
It does restore a little bit of my faith in the court, because the legal standard is, do you have standing to bring a case? Like, can anybody bring a case in front of the Supreme Court? No. You have to prove that you have injuries resulting from it. And so you've got a group of doctors and a group of citizens and all of these people bring this challenge to the FDA and say, we don't want this pill.
So put aside for a second the irony, right, that faith is only restored when you agree with a ruling. Therefore, it's not really faith. It's just, do I agree or not? I find it amazing that when it was 9-0, it is just the Supreme Court. But today, it's everything about Trump-appointed justices. That said, is it fair to make the point that Donald Trump appointed 3 justices? He said why he was going to do it. He ran on it. Therefore, it's not the Supreme Court that's brought this upon themselves, but politicians who have brought this upon the Supreme Court.
I think that's an excellent point, Leland. It's okay for presidents and members of the Senate who confirm justices to take public positions on the kind of people they would like to see on the courts, and to, when they're in office, keep their promises. I wish politicians did that more often. Right? So if Donald Trump got up and said, I'm going to pick from this list, no presidential candidate ever did that before, and he kept his word. That's actually the way we, the people, we, the voters, have any kind of influence on the Supreme Court and the direction of constitutional law. Suppose the Supreme Court was going way off track, like the time it upheld racial segregation. I think it would be totally appropriate for a president to say, I think segregation is wrong, and I'm going to appoint justices who want to get rid of it. And here's a list of people, and you, the voters, send me to Washington, and we will try to move the Supreme Court in the right direction. Not only is that appropriate, that is constitutional. That's actually way better than all these attacks on the individual justices and who they hang around with, who they have drinks with. This is actually, as you, Leland, the way you described is the way you should do it.
Due respect, though, it's a little bit more than who they hang around with, right? And I agree with you on the flag issue outside of Alito's house. Blaming your wife, to me, is never a good look. But, Justice Thomas's gifts and luxury travel, that's the appearance of impropriety. It may not be illegal, but you should know that when you're flying around on billionaires' jets and taking vacations from them and that are way beyond what your income allows, that people are going to see that and see that it looks like influence peddling. Justice Jackson's $900,000 book advance for a memoir. Sonia Sotomayor and her law clerks and her book deals. Jackson's Beyonce tickets. I mean, you say that the court brought this upon themselves because they're so powerful. It's also because how they behave, is it not?
Well, first, I do have a bias here because I did clerk for Justice Thomas, and so that's probably going to affect how I think about this. But the other point I'd make is this pressure, I think, is part of a broader campaign to delegitimize the Supreme Court because the progressives on the left don't like what happened in the abortion case in Dobbs a few years ago. They don't like what happened in the gun rights case. Justices have always been individuals. They have families, they have friends, they write books, they travel. Why is it only in the last 2 to 4 years have we seen these kinds of attacks? That's what I would ask.
Okay, fair
you could have
point.
Made these. You launched these.
Go ahead.
No, you could have launched these criticisms against other justices in the past. What we should really care about, and I actually don't have a problem with any of the conduct you've mentioned, is are people trying to influence the justices and how they decide? That's really what we should care about. Are these people who are, right? So I know Harlan Crow took Justice Thomas on trips to different places and they hung around as friends. Is there any evidence at all that Mr. Crow had any business before the Supreme Court or that Justice Thomas changed his mind in any way because of their friendship? I don't think so. I'm waiting to see that. If there was that kind of evidence, then I
think you'd agree with me. Good luck trying to get Clarence Thomas to change his opinions on anything that he doesn't agree with or isn't convinced by argument.
No,
I mean, okay.
That's
so
my
there is
point of view. Is like no, that's my point of view as someone who worked for him and have been in this relationship with him for many, many years since I clerked. He's the guy who would at least change his mind on the Supreme Court about anything because of anybody.
Well, you're a professor. That means you study history. Where does this go? Have we been in a case, and forget the irony, right, of you're supposed to believe in institutions and they're so important to the left until they're not. You're supposed to believe in the rule of law until the law is decisions you don't like. Forget the irony there. Have we ever been in history in a position where an institution has been attacked like this and come back?
That's a great point. There are two periods where the Supreme Court actually went through worse, I would say. The first was under Thomas Jefferson because he hated his cousin, John Marshall, who was the Chief Justice, but really didn't like the Supreme Court of the early years. Yeah, you can't hate each other as much as Virginia cousins can hate each other. But no, what really happened was that the Supreme Court was expanding the Constitution broadly, and Jefferson didn't like it. And they started impeachment proceedings. They actually had impeachment proceedings against another justice, but it failed. The other time, and this is the time that's most important, is when the Supreme Court would not go along with the New Deal, and FDR tried to pack the court. He attacked the court in speeches. He had his allies threaten to increase the Supreme Court to 15 justices from 9. FDR lost, but you still see the echoes of that today by progressives who now want to increase the size of the Supreme Court because they don't like the size. So the court has gone through it. It has weathered it in the past. It takes time to rebuild that kind of legitimacy. I got to say, actually, in the face of these attacks, Thomas and Alito or even Jackson, it's more important for them not to give in, not to step down, not to change their behavior, because that's only going to encourage more of these attacks.
All right, fair enough. The book is The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Supreme Court. I don't often do this, but I ordered it as we were talking before the segment. And it's good summer reading. I think there's probably no more important topic going forward when you think about what the Supreme Court's going to decide in the next couple of weeks. And then very likely some of the issues of the election will be before the court as well. Professor Yoo, thank you, sir. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
One thing nobody does in Washington ever is tell the truth. The other thing nobody can do, they're just not secure enough, is laugh at themselves. Here's John Fetterman, the junior senator from Pennsylvania, doing both, as he said the quiet part, the silent part out loud.
Under the previous order, the Senate stands adjourned until 3 p.m. on Monday. Bang, gavel.
It's not a big thing, but humility and self-awareness are qualities almost impossible to find here in D.C., worth pointing out when it happens. America's second Catholic president in history just met with the Pope. What exactly is the Pope thinking in this picture? We'll decode the facial expressions next. With the Pope. Take a look. We bring our body language expert for this. Scott Rouse trains law enforcement and the military in interrogation and body language, author of Understanding Body Language, How to Decode Nonverbal Communications in Life, Love, and Work. And the only guest I'm ever self-conscious when I talk to, because I have to try to think, what is Scott really thinking about what I'm doing in these moments? We're going to play the video back, Scott, of Biden and the Pope. Give us your thoughts.
Okay.
Here it is.
Okay.
The video? There it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think what's going on, he feels so, he's a devout Catholic, Biden is. He's been a Catholic, forever and a day. He practices Catholicism, and I think he feels so close to the Pope that quite often people want to put their foreheads together when they feel really, close to someone. I believe they've met before. So I believe he feels really close to him. That's why he's trying to do that. Mothers will do that to little babies, and fathers will do that to their daughter. They'll touch foreheads and look them right in the eye. It's about as close as you can get. So I think that's what's happened there. He feels really close to him.
How's the Pope feeling?
I think he's probably used to that kind of thing, because it didn't look surprised. Didn't look like he's trying to get away from it. So everything with him looks as it should. He doesn't look surprised or anything. Yeah. But he's a pro at that. So it looks the way it should. Everything looks normal there.
Okay. Fair enough.
So.
This moment caught our eye yesterday. The president had one of his first press conferences, or his first press conference in a very long time, at the G7. And one of the reporters asked a question that was not about the G7 and Ukraine. And you could see the president really sort of gristle and scold the reporter from Bloomberg. Take a listen.
Okay.
I wish you guys would play by the rules a little bit. I'm here to talk about a critical situation in Ukraine. You asked me another subject. I'll be happy to answer it in detail later.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and it might be a situation where the question was a little bit long because I listened to the question. I got a chance to look at the video before we did this, and that's when the classic Biden shuts down. He gets real still, sticks up one hand. At the very end, he's closing his eyes like he doesn't want to. It's called eye blocking, where he's completely pushing the guy off. So he may be a little angry, but he at the same time may be a little bit frustrated. Is what it looks like to me with that question, since it didn't have anything to do with what he's there for.
When you say the eye blocking thing, because we've seen him do that at times, and is that him sort of being frustrated at the situation, or is that almost like an old coping technique of the stutter, of trying to slow his mind and his speech pattern down?
It could be a combination of things. Quite often when we see eye blocking, that gives us the impression the person is either seeing something they don't like, or are being presented with something they don't like, or they hear something they don't like. Like, for example, if you and I were hanging out and we were telling some kind of joke that was way over the edge and somebody was standing there and didn't want to hear it, we may see them close their eyes as we're doing that. So it
seems like kind of a high bar, though, right? For him to do this eye blocking thing, it seems like a pretty, I don't want to say extreme, but an awfully large response or emotional response to just getting asked a question you don't like.
Yeah, I think the question was kind of long, so it may be a little bit too much for him to keep putting together with the neurological situation he's got going on here. So it may be a little tougher because of that and frustrating. So
makes sense. And if you're the president, it's easy to get frustrated because there's not a lot. They do a good job keeping you unfrustrated, or the people around you work pretty hard to protect you from that. Donald Trump and Logan Paul were together ahead of Mr. Trump's birthday. Take a look.
And where down we
All right, Logan Paul being a martial arts champion. Was that genuine, the reaction between the two of them?
At the end it was. I mean, you can tell it's totally set up. And Trump, I think, is trying not to laugh on his way in. It's got to be uncomfortable for both of them, because when you get that close to somebody you don't know, that's not an intimate person in your life, family member, best friend, whatever, then things get a little bit iffy there, and it's really tough to get that close to someone. They know it's not going to last, and something has to happen to break it up at the end, and I'm sure that's what it was. They both got the giggles there at the end to show that they bonded and everything's cool between them.
Yeah. All right. So this was Trump, and this is after him meeting with Republicans in the House and Senate. And look, it's been hot in Washington. It can get hot in the Capitol. But he seemed quite uncomfortable. Take a listen.
There's great unity, very similar, different topics, actually, but not that different. And there's one thing in common. We want to make America great again. We want to make our country great again. We're a nation that's in decline. We're a declining nation. We're a nation that is being laughed at all over the world.
Is he searching there? What's going on?
Well, I think he's got stock answers he gives. He's got a stock Trump you see when he's giving specific answers to a type of question, in other words. So in this case, he says, in his mind, I'm sure he says, okay, I know how to handle this, and just goes out without rehearsing it or thinking about it much and just starts talking. But his answer is prepared because he knows the answer to that, so that's what he gives. So, and he's a little bit heated up there sweat-wise. It looks like he literally may be hot there. But, the guy's been through a lot, so he's probably worn out at this point. And he's just delivering as Trump delivers, like he always does.
Yeah, the thing where he does, lots of issues, but they're not that different, in decline, where he sort of says it, and then sometimes he says it again for emphasis, and then sometimes he says it again, but completely contradicts the first statement. What's that?
Well, it could be a safety mechanism where it's like, I did say this, but I said this. I mean, when it comes to politics, there's no telling what that person is thinking as you go through these situations. There's no way to get in their brain and say, hey, here, here's what he's thinking, or here's what's going on.
2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks till the big debate, Scott, and we're going to have you on. We're going to dissect everybody, their past debate performances, what advice you'd give them on and on. That's next week. Have a great weekend. Happy Father's Day.
Thanks. Same to you.
Yeah, good to see you, sir. The Biden campaign is crying foul again, this time over a New York Post cover. If you're crying to the refs, does that mean you're losing when we come back? Into the weekend, be careful what you see on TV. It could be misinformation or disinformation. And the same people who censored Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation now want to censor unflattering videos of President Biden. Seriously. Watch this clip of Biden campaign senior advisor Adrian Elrod.
These are dirty tactics that MAGA Republicans are using because they can't run on the issues, Lemire. They have to use these dirty tactics like this because they are not right with Americans on the issues. So we're going to see more of this. We're going to do what we can to combat it. But it does take the voices of surrogates across the country. It does take the media to call it out. It does take social media platforms where a lot of Americans are getting their information to point it out as well.
Just like social media pointed out all those things about COVID, right? And to be fair, there's some selectively edited clips of Mr. Biden going around. Then again, there are a lot of clips of Mr. Biden wandering off or staring blankly before figuring out where to go. Reasonable people can agree Joe Biden now is not the same Joe Biden of 4 years ago. But any bad clips of him are now misinformation. They should be banned by social media. Misinformation is now information the White House doesn't like. Just like the Hunter Biden laptop. That was disinformation. It was a Russian plot. Here's MSNBC 4 years ago.
History will expose you all as fools and useful idiots for the Russians. It's for 4 years now. For 4 years now, there has been a line from Russian agents into the campaign. It's unbelievable how stupid you think Americans are.
4 years later, we're the fools, right? The laptop was real. And that's the problem. How stupid do people think we are? Disinformation is dangerous, but Democrats and their friends are becoming like the boy who cried wolf. If disinformation isn't just stuff you don't like, nobody cares when real disinformation comes out. One piece of real information. I love my father very much, and boy, am I grateful to him. Happy Father's Day, Dad. Brian's in for Chris.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Enton filling in for Chris Cuomo tonight. We start with breaking news from across the pond. Princess Kate announced today that she will make her first public appearance since Christmas of last year. After much speculation, even conspiracy theories about her whereabouts, this past March, she finally revealed that she was undergoing treatment for an undisclosed form